Yeah, that looks like one of those. I thought you had one of the fake Zoom backgrounds when I first got in
Oh,
there.
no.
I saw the leaves moving.
This is real, man. That's the bull's ass.
That's great. That's a spot.
Welcome to officially episode 1 of Growth Rose Podcast. We're super excited to have Jack Butcher with us, the king, the legend himself.
Jack Butcher, what up?
Jack, man, how are you doing?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah, man, we needed you as our first guest, and I've known you for a few years, and we finally got to meet right before I moved out of Nashville, and that was super cool. And I was just really happy you decided to do this with us. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure the last few weeks have been kind of wild, kind of hectic.
Madness, mate. We have a 6-week-old too, so everything's sort of converged at a wild moment. What has it been? 6 weeks now? Crazy. We got this thing shipped on Sunday though, so it went from like super high tension shipping this thing that is immutable that you can't get wrong to just a little bit lower level tension now, but we're still having a good time.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's still like in most of the NFT group chats that I'm in, it's just checks. And I've just been complaining. I was like, how the fuck did I not buy a check? Like, I'm just the worst NFT person ever. So like, I kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit. I've known you for, I guess, going on 6 years now. And I think a lot of the NFT people that know you now don't really realize how deep you've been in the game for a while with visualized value and how all that got started. Do you want to kind of give some background of, pre-visualized value? Like, I know you worked for Ferrari and a bunch of other brands, like how you went from that and pivoted into the Twitter space and got to where you're at.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in the UK, studied graphic design as I guess you would call that undergrad here, right, in the States. So 3-year program, graphic design, and got an internship straight out of school, worked in London, like a little tiny design studio, and had a friend of a friend I met in a bar one night that's like, oh, we know this person who works for Virgin Atlantic, I think it was. They can get cheap tickets to New York, and we're going. You want to come? I was like, yep, sign me up. I'm in. About a week before I left, I was like, oh, maybe I should try and meet some people that are in the graphic design world over there. I know New York is, there's a lot of amazing talent. Obviously, a huge design community in New York. So I think I Googled graphic design internships New York, and the first result was Craigslist, like classified ads for graphic design posts. I sent 150 emails to every single classified ad on that list with basically my college portfolio saying I'll come and I just want to meet anybody that will spend time with me and figure out how the game works basically. And I got one reply from a guy who had been Madison Avenue advertising guy for 25 years or something, just set up his own shop. And that eventually turned into proper sponsorship and stuff. He was a early mentor of mine for a couple of years. So worked on Ralph Lauren, like print ads and shooting like commercials, worked on little branding projects for like small boutique businesses in New York, and just kind of got exposed to the world of branding, marketing, advertising, whatever you want to call it. And spent about 10 years after that just bouncing around in that world. So big agencies, little agencies, went in-house, worked at startups, did, UI design, event design, just like retail, just basically every commercial application of design you could think of, did a job in some way, shape or form. And then just got, I guess, enough exposure by the time I was about 10 years in to sort of understand the economics of the agencies I was working at. And like, when you get to a certain level, you're like looking at the way they cost out the jobs. And this was kind of, I guess I was late 20s at this point. So still, like, there's definitely some naivety and arrogance going on. I had that like 20s energy, and I was looking at these things. I was like, wait a minute, they're charging the client this much and I'm getting paid this much. So I see the gap there, and I was like, maybe I should just start my own ad agency. And obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it than the person who's sitting on the end of the thing doing the design work. And I quickly realized that. I got about 6 to 9 months into trying to run my own thing. I was like, man, I don't want to hire 20 people. I don't want to like lease real estate in Manhattan. If you want to work with these big brands, like there's a level of expectation they have around, you know, the place they come to visit when they're in town. And like, you can't come to my 400 square foot Brooklyn apartment to show a presentation. So that was like the catalyst for just trying to change the business model, basically. So I went from starting out with these decent sized corporate clients who I'd gotten from like referrals where I'd worked in old agencies, had some good relationships. But ultimately, it's just a pain in the ass working with those big brands because you're just absorbing their inefficiency. There's, you know, they want a meeting for every word in a sentence that you're going to publish. And that's like, I just did not want to do that. No, you know, if that's what you want to do, fair enough. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So just visualize value is basically like 5 iterations out from that. So I went from this agency that did everything to then like, oh, I'm only going to work with automotive brands. That was the same thing, just in a narrower niche. And then, oh, maybe I'll work with startups because I get close to the decision maker. And that was a clue of getting something a little bit, you know, you felt like you're doing something a little bit more useful. Like a lot more of your work was actually getting to market in that scenario. But visualize value, when it kind of started to get some traction, was when I decided to just do that. So if you had a complicated message that you want explained, this is the output you can expect, right? I'm just going to do these very simple vector graphics, and that might have been a pitch deck. It might have been like an internal document that people needed to onboard a certain person or onboard a client, whatever it might be. So I got into like the service side of it first, and then it eventually got bigger than that when the social stuff started to take off. So I would post these graphics on Instagram and Twitter to basically get clients in the beginning. And it got to the point where the inbound for clients was like more than I could handle. So then I went the education route. So, okay, if people want to hire me to do this, I can't scale it beyond myself. I could start training people. But again, I didn't really want to do that. So I thought about building curriculums that teach the discipline of visualizing value. So how do you take an idea, turn it into a visual that more like can communicate it quickly, easily, and transmit like a meme around, whether that's internally, externally, whatever else.
Worth 1,000 words, right?
Exactly. That's the goal. And yeah, so that was a couple of years, and that's probably where we were first introduced, or that work being around on the internet connected me to a ton of people before I even knew what an NFT was. I thought before most of the world, I think, knew what an NFT was. And then these two things just kind of intersected in the last couple of years through actually building those education products, having like a couple of thousand people in my like that I would spend time with every day in one way, shape, or form, and people would bring ideas in. And that's actually how we're having this conversation now. It's like the idea of NFTs and why they made sense for a brand like Visualize Value that was already producing internet art. This was just like this complementary layer that I started dabbling with in 2021.
So what made you kind of choose the checks? Like, what was the vision behind that originally?
So I think there was a piece I did in 2021 called NFTs Explained. It was 2 basically white geometric boxes next to each other. One on the left says JPEG, one on the right says NFT, and the NFT one is accented with the blue check mark in the top right. So the idea being, this symbol that already represents so much to so many people, especially this was even before the Elon conversation and the Twitter takeover. This was like when the blue check mark still meant celebrity in inverted commas, or like notable person. So that idea paired up with NFTs really made sense to me, like linking those 2 symbols together, or those 2 ideas together, because that's what it really is, right? It's a signature from an artist or, you know, a producer of something to a consumer or a collector of a thing. And that was, I think, the idea came from 2 years ago. And then so much of the cultural context has happened in the last 2 years. Elon buying Twitter. What is a notable person? What is who is the author of a thing? Who has authority, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of the themes in NFTs are unpacking that in many ways, right? It's like it introduces transparency to how things are done in a way that there wasn't any infrastructure for before. So
Sure.
CHECKS is all these different themes like packed into a single image. And I think since it went out, it feels almost like it sort of hit a nerve. Like so many people had been thinking about this idea, or you've just like the news and the conversation around it is so prevalent that everybody had the kind of their own interpretation of it. And I think that's what exploded the meme of it. And then the second phase of it came all after just that first image that was supposed to represent all of those ideas and a moment in time.
So what's your kind of marketing approach been with the checks? I know you already had obviously a massively huge platform and a huge fan base, but before that, I really wasn't seeing your name in the NFT conversation, like in NFT Twitter. Did you do anything differently with the checks as opposed to what you were doing with Visualized Value, or did you just kind of let it grow organically?
It's definitely all organic, but I think I have a different attitude or a different relationship with it than the Visualized Value stuff, because there was like rumblings of this with Visualized Value, right? People would take the images and maybe modify them or play around with them or do their own version of them, but they didn't take off in the same way. And I think one of the reasons for that is like they're very different ideas. Like the Visualized Value output is really trying to get to the best version of the idea. It's trying to explain the thing in the most concise way. So the reinterpretation of it is not as personally interesting to me. I said this the other day. I was talking to someone. It's like almost a difference between like CHECKS is trying to ask a question and Visualized Value is trying to answer a question. So these visuals that depict an idea that's already kind of solidified, or I've read in a book or somebody said that's really profound, you can basically add context to it and be like, let's build, let's just like further confirm that, versus CHECKS is like, hey, this is what's going on in the world right now. What's your interpretation of that?
Interesting.
And that has felt like I wouldn't say that's 100% intentional, but I'm like looking back on it retrospectively and be like, what made it work? And I think that has a lot to do with it. And the meme of it extends beyond the like any one piece of it. Obviously the symbol is a huge part of it. The grid layout, where people can even not reference the symbol and it's connected, or you can take the grid out of it and reference the symbol and it feels connected. So it's just got all of these different little accidental qualities, I think, that make it much more memeable, spreadable. And it's just been cool to see the degree of like breadth of interpretations. Like there's engineers building on it, there's musicians building on it, there's designers, artists, writers, poets. It's just like weirdly malleable, but because the symbol I think is so recognizable, it gives it just creates this thread through everything in a way that Visualized Value I don't think could have ever done or will ever do. It's just a very different animal.
How does the burning mechanism work into all this? What was your idea behind that, and how do you think it's kind of going to affect the project moving forward?
So the technical term for this is burning, but I actually should have put more emphasis on this idea of compositing. So what you're actually doing when you burn in inverted commas is like combining two pieces together, and you don't lose the history of these things. You combine them into a new output. So like conceptually, there's 16,000 of these things out there. And this is an obvious commentary on like people paying for status, right? The $8 a month Elon subscription that you pay this, and you become notable, quote unquote. So the real question that's being asked in the second phase of it is like, if these get more scarce, do they become more valuable? So how do we do that? We literally make them more scarce. Like the more you put together, the fewer check marks there are represented in the art, which is, from a conceptual standpoint, that's the question we're trying to answer. Also, we're trying to give agency to the people who collected the work too. So you make decisions that influence the way that the art looks. And the other kind of theme that we're playing with is that there's now 2 collections. So the original collection, the edition that was originally sold, I have full like admin rights over that, right? I can go in and change the metadata, change the image that thing represents. And I think that spurred a lot of conversation around what is an NFT. The common misconception is that it's an image, right? You have access to this image, you have rights to this image, and that's, they're varying degrees of like permission given by people who run projects in the IP department. But what we're really trying to demonstrate is between those 2 projects, the type of NFT you own is completely different. So in the edition case, you own this kind of placeholder almost, where I have the ability to update the image, the thing that it points to. And when you take agency of it and you move it on chain into the editions contract, I can't touch it, right? It's completely out of my hands. It's fully immutable on-chain art that will exist until the end of Ethereum. So yeah, there's a bunch of different themes. The mix of it though, there was 16,000 tokens to begin with, and you essentially can move every single one of those on chain, and that creates a completely unique, completely random on-chain original, which have the 80 checks on it. So you can see that right now if you go on OpenSea and just look at the difference between the 2 collections. What happens after that is these things can get composited together. So 2 80s create a 40 check, 2 40s create a 20, 2 20s create a 10, 2 10s create a 5, blah, 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 all the way down to a single colored check, which is 64 editions. So you have to composite 64 editions to create this 1 check. And then we have this final dynamic, which is 64 1 checks to create the black check. And there's only 3 possible. That's only possible to create 3 of those, because it would take 4,096 tokens to make that happen. So
do you think anybody's going to get there?
There's people building building infrastructure to try and pull it off right now, like a DAO aggregator to hold checks. So if you want to contribute to this thing, you pledge 2 or 3 or however many you have, and then I don't know the ins and outs of how they're building it, but ultimately you would have fractional ownership of the black check if they were successful. There's people like have taken this and run with it in ways that I didn't really imagine when I started it.
The game theory behind this is going to be so interesting to watch. Like just how people are going to hold, how they're going to sell, how heavy people are going to go after them. This is probably the most unique NFT project I've seen in terms of like just game theory. Like it's going to be really, really fun to watch. I hope someone gets one of those black checks. I hope so.
Me too, man. Me too. It's going to be incredible to see.
Yeah.
It's fun, man. There's like all these different things that we didn't even predict that would happen when we were designing the thing. Even in, people who have 1 or 2 of these things that are really after a certain aesthetic, for example, and the compositing is deterministic, so you know what you're going to get before you mint. So there's another thing that created this like completely different behavior than say say just a random result all the way through. So you take 2 and you put them together and then you get another random. Every single interaction after the migration is deterministic. So we know the DNA of those 2 things, and we know the result they're going to produce out. There's 2 possible permutations. So the strategies that you're starting to see play out now is like, I want a gold single check. I need a ton of yellow and gold at the top of the lineage to try and breed that down to a gold outcome. So yeah, there's a lot of games that people are playing that we didn't predict they would, and I don't think we've seen the end of the considerations that people are making, and the way, like, the goal really at the end of this is like the art that gets output is really a reflection of like psychology in the macro sense. Like everybody that interact with it makes the art, and you can look at the entire collection and get a sense of how people are playing and what people care about. Like, for example, if we see after a year 50% of people, let's say, just kept the single migrated original 80, that would indicate to me that people just care about having their own unique single piece of art. If it gets all the way down to the black check, then there was a group or an individual that was motivated enough to amass a third of the collection, which is a crazy thing to even think that's possible. And I don't know how that would play out, but yeah, the art is in every individual piece, but it's also designed, the whole thing is a piece of art when you look at it all together.
Yeah, you've gamified NFTs,
It
truly
reminds
gamified
me
it.
so much of like the breeding in Pokemon, like the original Pokemon games. Like, I remember like back on the internet, like 10 years ago, people were like talking about like, how do I get a shiny Pokemon out of the daycare center?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, man.
Yeah, I was definitely a big Pokemon guy back in my early teens, I guess it would have been. But yeah, I think there's some really interesting, again, accidental things that come out of this in post, which, like, the fact that it isn't like this anthropomorphic creature as well, I think has helped it in many ways. Like, it brings a different type of participant, different level of thought around this thing, where there's nothing wrong with like two anthropomorphic creatures creating this other like mutant child or whatever it is that happens in a lot of other dynamics. But this thing is like abstracts away enough of it abstracts away, I guess, these like anthropomorphic traits that are such a specific magnet for a certain type of taste, or a certain group of people. So I think there's interest in, and there's more projects than I know about, honestly, that have incorporated dynamics like this, games like this. There's a lot of great stuff already out there. I think the secret accidental ingredient to this being, like, to people asking me to talk about this, I think is the symbol of the check mark that has just got so much embedded context and meaning of 15 years of. I didn't know this until I did some research on it after I put the work out, but 2009 that thing came out, which is
Wow,
a good amount of time ago at this point. So it's like in the collective consciousness, and has been for probably more than half of your boys' lives.
And it's peak culture right now. It's the most talked about thing on the internet. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, and weirdly, it can go anywhere. Yeah, we'll see what happens, man. It's like, having got the contracts out there and deployed that stuff, it's like it's set up now to do whatever everybody's going to do with it, and we'll see.
So you're just sitting back and watching at this point.
I don't know if I go that far. We definitely got stuff to build, but the fundamental infrastructure of it, we're just watching the behavior, trying to answer questions about how it works just technically. And I think next few weeks, once we deploy a couple other things, like, we want to make it possible for people to basically look back at the family tree of everything. So right now you can kind of do that on a per token basis, but this is another thing I think would be a great result of this, is to kind of poke around and get, like, start asking questions about what provenance is in NFTs and digital art in general, where, this is not just it doesn't just spawn this new random thing. It contains all the history within this single piece that says, this person chose these like 16 pieces and merged them into this, and all of that will be accessible throughout the the provenance data on every token versus, you know, these things like not really having a story and just floating around in the ether. I think there's just a ton of opportunity to use this as like a layer to explain so many more things, whether they're like social or like psychological ideas, or they're like really technical. This is what's the only way this is like we're able to accomplish this is using NFTs as the underlying technology, which that's kind of a challenge that we set ourselves throughout the process. It's like if we could accomplish this with any other tech stack, it's not really an NFT art project, right? It's an art project that happens to be an NFT, but we're trying to use every piece of the underlying technology in a way that that like everything that makes up the work is taking advantage of and using the nuances of the tech. So I think we've done a decent job so far.
So you mentioned like a little bit of traditional art. Do you think Checks is going to cross over to the traditional art market and like what we see at Christie's, man?
We'll see, man. Yeah. So I think there's we're gonna do a little NFT Paris exhibit. That was a cool little request to curate. We got 10 screens going up next weekend in Paris, and I think there's potential. I think the aesthetic of it can transcend both. I think there's definitely art and there, because of just the explosion of NFTs and PFPs specifically 2 years ago, the top PFP projects have done Sotheby's, Christie's, like all of these like old money art houses. So I don't know if you could argue whether or not they've made it into the traditional art world. I think the art world wants the 50% commission on those massive sales, which is probably more of the reason why they made it into Christie's and Sotheby's than like their position in art history. In some cases, there's definitely obviously a ton of incredible projects that are already art history. But yeah, it would be cool to see that happen. But it's also, there's also some interesting. I have some like conflicts in my mind about that too, where the part of the ideology of the project and this idea of circumventing institutions in general, there's something a little not punk about selling your shit at Christie's or Sotheby's, right?
Yeah. I guess that's not cool anymore.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to touch on, I realized you decided to do a lot of philanthropic work with a lot of the Czech stuff for the stuff going on in Turkey. What did that look like, and what made you decide to do that, and how did you kind of structure that?
So I think that's another great and underutilized application of this technology is the tangibility of giving. So one of the things that I used to observe happening when like terrible shit goes down is people change their Facebook profile picture to have a frame around the edge of it or put a filter over the top of it or whatever else. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great like signal of solidarity with a cause. But it's very different than sending economic energy somewhere, right? With proof that you did it. So I think one of the things that NFTs can enable, both like on the signaling side, like I contributed XYZ, the other component of it is you can make it really tangible. So what I've tried to do with the majority of the philanthropic stuff that we've done, we've been doing it for a couple of years now, is make the NFT represent the thing you're giving. So we did this care package for like this humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan that represented a 30-day medical shelter, food supplies for a family of 4. And that thing very tangibly represents that in your wallet versus you sent $5 to charity X, right? Which everybody should do. And that's amazing. But there's real opportunities, I think, to make tangible what it is you're contributing. So artists particularly have an amazing opportunity to align themselves with causes they care about and make art that represents the end result in some way. So another great example would be like a building infrastructure somewhere, right? Say you're building a well somewhere that doesn't have clean water. Every single piece of that project could be abstracted into a piece of art that then helps people that are looking at that project like, oh, we collectively built this thing. Like I bought a brick, or I bought, a pulley system for this thing. And that's definitely something that will continue to be part of the work. And I think Checks, hopefully the scale of it and the reach of it can really increase the amount of good we can do with with like making giving tangible and helping people understand where their money is going, and all of the things that need to improve too on the charity side, where like, what am I paying for? There's a lot of controversy obviously around how much of the money you spend gets to wherever it's going. And one of the other things that I think we'll see in the coming years is just peer-to-peer value exchange. Like if there's somebody somewhere that needs help, do we need in every case an intermediary to take that money, pay 1,000 salaries, and like then like catch flights and distribute something somewhere? There's been examples of this on Twitter the last few weeks. People in Turkey, Syria, on the ground, like I can buy supplies for people in my immediate vicinity, just send them the money, or auction an NFT that represents the thing that they're going to buy for the people around them. And that's, I think, the ultimate promise of this technology is disintermediation of all this stuff. Like if you can move economic energy instantly anywhere in the world, then I think what NFTs honestly do is like they just have the attention. They have the attention magnet attached to them in a way that traditional giving doesn't either.
Yes.
Like I could retweet like, "Hey, send money to this person," and nobody will do it. I guarantee you, nobody will do it. If I say, "Hey, here's a VV NFT that if you buy it, $10 is going to this person," the participation rate is going to be exponentially higher.
Yep.
So it's like a legit arbitrage
genius.
opportunity to do good.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, people want that badge of honor that they donated to something, and like take that as it is, but like it's for the greater good. So that's a good thing. I think that's just an amazing angle.
Yeah, I think you'll be doing more of this?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like this stuff is like, honestly, this is the most satisfying part of the whole process. Is it's nice to sell art, and it's nice to like have high concept conversations about what your art means and all that stuff. But if that can, redirect some energy, some like to somewhere or someone or people that need it, that's, I think, a better use of my energy. But obviously you have to do both to get the level of attention required to redirect the energy. So they both play off each other. But yeah, expect more for sure.
Can you tease anything about what you're working on in the future?
More of the same, honestly. So I think one thing that a lot of projects do that we won't do is like, here's what we're working on for the next 6 months or 12 months, or here's what's coming in 2 years. Because I honestly don't know if the market's going to want what we're building in 2 years. So the way that I've operated for the last 3 or 4 years, at least, is listening to what people are saying and building what they want a week out, 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. So I've just never, I did see the value in that before I started working on the internet, and seeing that, locking yourself in a basement and building something that nobody wants, you can get it right. And it does work for some people, but it's just not my style. So I think expect the continuation of transparency, asking questions, floating ideas. And if they resonate, we'll build them. So that's,
how are you able to iterate so fast in your organization? Like, I mean, I can't imagine there's 100 people working underneath you, but like you guys are doing like huge changes, like pretty rapidly.
2 people. So it's me and 2 other guys.
Wow.
And they're just animals. That's really the secret for the most part is like you just have to find the best people. And the other thing I think is I've known them for 3 years, 4 years. Like Visualize Value was the catalyst for me meeting these guys and the trust that's been built up. We've done side project here, this and that and that. So it's like one sentence message in Discord, like we need to build this. I know their taste level is amazing. I know they understand what I'm saying. I know like I could trust them with anything. So it's just like a ridiculously unfair advantage to work with people that you trust and they have amazing taste. And yeah, shout out to Jalil and Traf, who've been massive parts of the Checks project specifically. And
we'll throw their Twitter handles underneath right here.
Yeah. Please do follow those guys. And
just talking about that, like, yeah, this is going to be to educate, our listeners. But for me and Ro, like, we're going to learn stuff every podcast from everyone we speak to. Like, it's going to be just as beneficial to us as it is to our listeners.
Yeah, I think that's a great like barometer for whether or not to do something anyway, right? The idea of like, if you would do this and nobody would listen to it, then you should, that's the reason to do it and put it out there. Like and I think that's a weird paradoxical thing where people think about like the marketing strategy behind this thing versus like, would this be fun? Am I interested in it? And 9 times out of 10, if that's true, it becomes a magnet for other people that think like you, are interested in the same things as you, etc. It's like follow your gut, follow your instinct, all that cliche advice. This shit's real. That's why it's a cliche.
Awesome. Well, so if this podcast flops, then we blame you for your advice.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, I'm kidding.
All right, Jack.
Sign off
let everybody know where they can find you. And, how they can get more.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jack Butcher, at Visualize Value, and Checks. You can find everything to do with Checks on checks.art, and all the project updates and stuff we're working on, I'll be tweeting about it. So you can also just hang around there. This is not a plug for me. This is I think Lex Friedman interviewed Mr. Beast last month, and he had this one quote in that podcast. I'll save you the 90 minutes or 2 hours or however it was. He said, upload 100 videos, then talk to me about likes. We'll sign off with that.